excited to see that he was
That
presenting
was
specifically about this topic because it fits not only to so many of our roles, but to mine directly, and it helps in service management.
it.
So without further ado, Nigel, would you share? Oh, yes. What have you got, Smojo?
Well, the fact is that there's a lot of background to what Nigel does.
Oh, nice.
There is indeed. And if you've not, and you'll look on his website and everything later, it's really cool. But I've known this dude for, I don't know, how long now, 10 years or so, and have had the privilege of working with him on a number of projects. And all I can say is that you're in for a really interesting headspin when it comes to your creativity around your content, etc. And it's really not as scary as what you think it is. So, Nigel,
Nice.
would you like to share your screen?
Yeah, of course. So I just wanted to say, I'll share my screen and I'll just say a few words as well. First of all, thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it. I actually used to do a lot of presenting back in the day, and then things kind of shifted a little bit. But Simone was quite right. We've done some pretty amazing stuff. In fact, I've been really, really privileged to have been part of some really, really cool projects around the EU. I filmed in Africa, I filmed in the Caribbean. I've got a real mixture of having worked with corporate clients. I've done some pretty epic travel stuff like filming wild animals out in the sticks. So when I talk about the attention bargain and the different things, I'm trying to bring together all my kind of experiences from all the different industries that I've touched. So what I would say is I obviously can't capture everything in my first run. So if you've got any questions or anything, by all means, save it to the end and I'll do my best to answer. Sound cool?
100%.
Okay. So let's just move to the next slide. So a little bit about me. Basically, before I started filmmaking, I'm from the Caribbean, and then I moved to Canada, in case some of you were wondering about my accent. I moved to London. It was only meant to be a 6-month stint. It ended up being 20 something years ago, so I never actually left. I started in the corporate world. I got my footing by presenting, and I was in charge of like product management. So I actually do have experience having worked in the software field. So what I did is I decided to leverage all my skills, and I basically 15 years ago I thought I would just do something entirely different. So I've started filmmaking. I started very early. I started at a time when there weren't as many people online teaching different aspects of that. So I kind of had to really figure it out by making my own mistakes. But I've worked with the likes of, companies like Freshworks in the background, SDI. I've done some stuff like helping with editing. If any of you have ever participated on any of the webinars that they have, I'm actually the guy that spruces them all together and brings them together. But I've done a whole variety. So I won't delve into all the different clients, but there's been some really, really cool stuff that I've worked on. So in terms of the agenda, I'm just kind of go over these really quickly because I won't spend too much time because I've got the clock running on my left-hand side right now. But you're all here because we want to talk about the attention bargain. So I'm going to go into that. I'm going to just talk about the first 20 seconds. I've got some other topics, getting, out of your own way, structure over duration, trust, AI, and consent. And the big thing that people forget about, and I'm going to leave it to the end, is what do we actually do when we've created the content and we've got it sitting there? So I'm going to slide along. Now, the bargains already existed. And what do we mean about that? I mean, first of all, the fact that you're all participating right now and you're listening to me, I mean, I've got your attention. The biggest risk that I've got is what is it going to take for you to drop off? What are the little things I'm going to do? Maybe you have something else going on. But if we kind of look at how historically it's kind of gone over, we've got the radio, we've got the 1930s, the 50s. It was traditionally kind of the only way that you would find out information. You'd gather around, you'd get the news, you'd get the comedy shows or whatever it might be. Then we moved into the broadcast. We can see we're starting to kind of progressively, there was just more stuff that was available. Now, cable, I remember the good old days. I was probably, actually my family at the time, we couldn't afford, and my dad wouldn't buy HBO. So I had to kind of, I was always trying to try and tune it some way, and the screen was all kind of fun. This was back in the days in the Caribbean. But basically it was, if you left during that time, you couldn't just pause. But now we've kind of moved into the streaming where we've got almost so much content that's available there. So when you're creating content from yourselves, from IT and like whatever businesses, and I often say this, you're not just competing against your competitors, you're competing against Bargain Time on Netflix, Prime Video, you name it, basically. And the fact that now we're going into mobile first, you could be watching something. What's to stop somebody from watching a presentation while they've got a second screen to the side where they can just do that? So this is just to kind of set the onus and to show you how we're progressively. And I think what I'm finding, especially with business, is that yes, you can navigate through this space, but it's the little kind of tricks that you do, and every industry, and there's also things, I'll just be honest about this. When you look at YouTube channels and all that, you see success rates. Oftentimes it depends on how much time's been put into it. That person may not have had the success initially. It might have taken them years. So it's just not always as easy to get the views. But this is kind of just laying the foundation of how things kind of have progressed. So if we now move into this, now we've heard about thumbnails, and I often think of it like this. The thumbnail is actually your trailer, in a sense. Not many organizations might have the ability to create a small little 10, 15-second trailer, whatever it is, to promote a particular event or product or something like that. So it's like, how do you actually catch people that, and bring them in? And the reason why I have this as a slide is because I still see it time and time again. I've created content for organizations where they don't have somebody in the marketing team and they haven't actually put the effort in to actually create a decent trailer, which is going to give some indication about what is the content going to be about, and also something visually stimulating as well. So I think that it's worth the effort just doing that. And you can do things like an A/B analysis where you can kind of compare to see what's working and what's not. But I really honestly do think that when you're scanning multiple tiles of content, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's YouTube, you think of what it is that actually captures you. And I think this is where, I was even saying to somebody in a different space outside the IT, in fact, a gardener, and I was just saying that, when you've got that small moment to captivate and get the attention of somebody, oftentimes it's that first initial impression that you need to somehow create. So I'm just kind of wanted to briefly, talk about this. Now, this is a really, really key, and I wouldn't say so much for people who are participating and watching, but I think that, when I talk about gone in 20 seconds, gone in 30 seconds, it's all about the distractions if you're actually presenting to somebody that's on screen. So if we kind of look at how I'm positioned right now, I've got my face, which is kind of, we call it a lower third. So if we look at the graphic, we can see those guidelines that are right there. I mean, if I were to simulate and go down like this, you can see that if I'm a presenter, you're kind of looking down at me. And if I stand up and I'm looking down like this, again, it's kind of odd. So that's such a simple thing that you can do. So if you're running a webinar with a series of people who are going to participate, you can spend that 10 or 15 minutes before and just do those checks to kind of make sure. And I would point you all, something that's really, really quite easy when you do this is if you look online at anyone who's presenting on cable, or, they had the presenters, they all dot themselves up kind of the same island, etc. And the other tip on this as well is, even if you're not the one that's speaking and there's 4 of you or 3 of you, when you start doing this, or you look to the side, or you're doing other things when the other person's looking at, I think no matter what, and I know it's often difficult, like right now, the way that I'm presenting, I try not to even look at my notes. I'm just kind of, freewheeling it or doing it kind of ad hoc, but I'm really trying to connect through the lens and imagine that everyone's there. So I might dip down and kind of look there, but I think that's just really important to kind of keep the attention. Because if I'm presenting a long presentation, I'm not doing any connectivity and I'm looking down at my notes the whole time and I'm looking like this. And I know it's tricky as well, because when you're looking at people who are participating, their faces might be on the screen. So you might be tempted to kind of look downward. So I would just say it's not necessarily a super easy thing to do, but if you can learn to just raise your eyes and try and, have your notes that are collected there, position yourself in the rule of thirds, look and try and maintain eye contact. Not only does it make you look more professional, but it just makes it look like I'm looking at all of you. So I think that's a really, really good thing that you can all practice on. And just on the left-hand side, it's kind of the traditional thing. Just be wary of any clutter or anything in the background. I get it. You might have to put on the blur screen. We don't have, we all can't jump into a room whenever we want. But even with that, just try and keep it as tidy, because what you don't want to have do, and this is where the attention kind of drift, is if I've got something funny in the background and I've got all of you, rather than paying attention to me, you're staring like, what is that? That's on the wall. That's kind of interesting. So you're losing your engagement in me, and you're starting to pay more attention to the back. So these are just a couple tips. And just in terms of audio first, just a really, really quick one. I've actually got a microphone on me right now. I wired it in my PC, very, very easy to do. I've got a couple options. I could either use the audio directly off of my laptop, or I could plug this in externally. It just goes in the USB. I've got my web camera, a simple trick as well. Truth is actually when you buy all these expensive laptops, the number one thing that they kind of cheapen is actually the web camera. It doesn't take that much money. If you can plug in a professional camera if you want, but even if you spend something like, I know I'm talking to audiences in the UK and the US, but even if you spend something like $60 US or $40, 40 pounds, if this is something that you're going to do and you're going to participate, I would wholeheartedly recommend that you just invest in a decent web camera, because it's night and day the quality that you're going to get. So I'm just kind of shift on. Now, in terms of webinars, so this is based on kind of 60 minutes, and they did studies, and I've got the quotes. I can go into more details, but basically webinars are all different shapes and sizes. We've got short ones that are 20 minutes. We have long ones that are 60 minutes. But I think the important thing is that, establish your credentials, get them over the hook. What is this actually about? What I did on this particular slide was I really, really wanted to create kind of a moody kind of first initial slide on the first, with the TV behind, kind of subtle. So I'm quite visual like that. I wanted to create a little bit of mystery, or just make it a little bit more than just your traditional white and just text on the background. Other things as well. I learned this from the days. Don't inundate people with too much text on screen, because there's only so much that you can process. I mean, I want to throw too much information. I would prefer that I'm the speaker and presenting, because when I'm looking down at my notes, for example, and I'm relying really on that, I'm losing that engagement. So what I personally like to practice is a couple notes. That means I can kind of talk loosely around them. I know the content, and then I can engage with you more better. So these are just a couple things, but you want to basically, good intro, establish who you are, go through the agenda, and just leave enough time for the minute. So right now, like, I've got my little phone on the side, 11 minutes. So I'm very particular about time. So what I try and do is, especially if there's speakers after you, is just be, practice if you can in advance, because it's hard when you eat in somebody else's time, because then they have to kind of shorten, or, it can kind of add a different couple things. So this is just a little bit about that. Now, this trick too, what do I mean by this? We've all watched comedy shows. I say any episode, anytime you're doing a presentation. If you create your presentation where you can miss the first 5 minutes, you can miss the first 10 minutes, but you could still dive in like an episode of Friends or something like that, where you get the gist of what the subject's about, but you can still learn and get something from that kind of segment. So everything in this talk, for example, it's all part of the attention bargain. But whether you've joined from the beginning or you join the next slide, there'll still be something that draws back to the overall theme. So like this, I've got the slide, so I'm just looking down at here. I mean, you can build some anchors. When I say keep it legible, this is just another tip as well, and this is something that I think that a lot of people don't appreciate. We hear the word storytelling, but storytelling is not just about the presentation and all that. It's even the smaller tip. Like, it's all about the detail. It's the font size. Is it legible? Can actually people see it? If people are going to join on their mobile phone or whatever, can they actually read it off that? So I think that even the simplest of detail that you choose, when it comes down to the attention, you could go for the traditional Arial, fair enough. You could go Times New Roman, it still works. But if you want to step into your brand and you just be really particular, because this is what also shapes the whole presentation that you've got. So coming back to the middle, yeah, it's just that kind of dropping in and dropping out, giving people an opportunity where they can, dive in and still get some input from that. And they can always watch it from the beginning. Now, if we jump into number 6, now trust in AI. Now, this is I think a really, really huge one. And I've got the quote there. Her voice is still working here, but she left in March. So what do I mean by that? This is kind of, first of all, I think we're in a whole new realm. We've got AI. There's a lot of things that are touching all of our businesses. I mean, I'm a creative. It's wiping out a lot of people from voiceover work to you name it. But what I mean by her voice is still working here. Imagine you were the company, you get, there's models that will train off of people's voices. You get Sally or you get John or whoever it is, and they basically lend their voice and say, oh yeah, I'm excited. I'll do the campaign. You create content, but then they've left the company. But then now that voice has been trained and it's in all of your assets. So it's just something to be kind of mindful of, because I think there's, I've got friends of mine, they get excited about the idea of digitizing their voice, but no one actually thinks about what happens when the employee actually leaves that business. And it's still a very, very gray area. I mean, can they demand that all these videos get taken down? Does the organization have to reproduce it? So this is what I kind of mean about that. And when we talk about the trust in I think it's also about, if you're going to present, and there are AI presenters that are out there where you can basically have your own kind of character, which is doing the work. If you're just letting the audience know that it's not just you, you can say, this is my digital avatar, for example. Because once people lose trust, it's really, really hard to gain. And I talk about this in one of my blog posts. If you go to it at the end, it's called, it's around the great trust blackout. And my thing is that, you've got people like Elon Musk, for example, who are creating a lot of ability to create videos through, imagery and all that. But at the same time, SpaceX is trying to do stuff to land on the moon. So my big worry is that if we get to a point where you can't actually believe what the video is and you're not designated what it is, like you'll see something monumental land on the moon, you go, oh yeah, it's just AI. You won't believe it. So it's just, I think if we can start battling down and just identifying and being fruitful about what it is that we're actually, what's real and not real, I think that will not only be really good for your business, but it's just a good thing to do. Now, long form, we come to this. Long form is great. And we've got, there's some podcasts out there that, they run an hour. Some of them are 3 hours. They're online. There's one called Diary of a CEO. There's plenty of people that speak on that. Really, really, really popular. But I think that just things to be mindful of for your businesses is what audience are you in? Also, I think, what's the content going to be? What I would probably do as well when you're doing any long form, and I'll get to the micro stories as well, is I think to be as authentic as you can. I've worked on a number of clients where they create the podcast and then they want to edit it, but they want to edit it so sharp where they take out the kind of the hums and ahas. Now, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about some of the webinar, like some of the more recent webinars that I've done. I'm talking about ones in the past where they've tried to do the the two people that are speaking with each other, where they literally cut out the moments where the person's looking up like this or shaking their head, the little moments that really, really do make it authentic. Because for me, when it feels like I'm looking at something that is just fictitious or fake, or it doesn't sound real because it's almost too artificial. I mean, for anyone that's been to Singapore, beautiful, absolutely stunning. Reason why I bring that is because it's in some ways it's so tidy and so clean that it's so perfect that you're kind of like, for me, and that's my kind of analogy of a podcast, is sometimes just let it roll. And the micro stories, this is kind of your bread and butter as well. You've got an event, you've got a webinar, short, simple, sweet. It doesn't have to be super ultra professional. What I would just say is get the basics right, get decent lighting. The one thing that people are going to leave immediately on is going to be if they can't hear you. I mean, if I'm talking like this and I'm just and I'm mumbling away, and I can watch the numbers drop off. I mean, that's the number one way. If you want people to leave your webcast or your talk straight away, you just go in there with terrible audio, which is why I say it's always good investment to try and give your best foot forward. I get it. Everyone has different budgets, etc. But the good thing is that costs are coming down. So if we kind of look at this, I mean, we've got the clips. I mean, we've got, I'm just going to read these through. We've got the process snippet, when it works. I mean, you'll have all these slides, and I'm just keeping mindful of time as well. But basically, these are just a few things that you can be clear of. It's quite explanatory here. But what I would also just say on this, just off the cuff, is that when I see content created for companies, it's usually quite one-sided. And the number of times where I've seen, for example, live event video, you're creating a promotional event for the organization that's throwing it and the people that are being featured, they would say to me, hey, where's this footage going to be? I would love to do it. I think if you want to get the attention of everyone out there, is don't just think about the people that you're filming as being participatory, but also being part, because if they can be included and be part of that marketing process, so let's face it, that's the hardest part, is getting people and eyes and everything on your content. So if you can create a kind of roadmap or way in which it can also mutually benefit them, I think it can really, really go a long way. Now, after you publish, this is a huge one for me. You gotta, I would just say, it's not just about throwing it out there and thinking about the next event. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to come back to the content? Are you going to repurpose it? There's tons of great content out there on YouTube. All I would just say is that it's not necessarily always about creating new stuff, new stuff, new stuff. Repurpose some of the old stuff that you've got. And the other thing I would do is, I mean, you look at, you come in, you create the content. I'll just go through this. And you look at the problem. You look at number 2, you make every segment stand alone. You check the numbers monthly. What do I mean by that? How many of you, or how many people do you know that create content actually look at the statistics? Because a YouTube video with 1,000 views is very different from the average duration. Somebody might have clicked on a video and they might have only watched it for 1 minute. What you get is to understand the numbers, and that's the only way that you can make a difference. So even with LinkedIn videos, you might see that there's X amount of views, but only those that are actually publishing the material will actually get to see those numbers. So I think it's kind of like knowing how much money is in your bank account. I would really, really encourage anyone that's on your marketing teams is just to pay particularly more attention, and you'd be really, really surprised. I work with startups, I work with billion-dollar companies, and it's oftentimes the companies that are the richest of the rich, like the billion-dollar ones that you hear and you see their advertising, and then you actually work with them and you realize no one's actually got their eyes on the ball in the marketing. No one's actually looking at the statistics. For them, it's just budget, ship, send, next project, budget, ship, send. So I would just make this as a party routine. And we're kind of coming to a close. So I've got 1 more minute. So these are just a couple items. I mean, you got your, I think I'm just mindful because I'm about a minute over. So I will just kind of probably leave this as a slide, but these are all kind of explanatory. So when you get the slide, you can kind of look at it. But some of these items I've already reached out or spoken about before. So I'm just going to move on. And I am, I think, 47 seconds over. So maybe the best thing to do is leave it as questions.
Nigel knew I had the whip ready.
Well, I know about time. I film these, I watch people speak a lot, and I know that the clock is so important. You got to really, really be mindful of the clock. You got to watch it like a hawk. So anyway, back over to you all.
Nigel.
It was a bit of a rush, but anyway.
No, it was fantastic. And there's some really good chat and everything. So for everyone, just while I just got this up on the screen, those QR codes there, please do go and have a look. He's created some really good short courses and stuff that I can highly recommend. Of all the projects in working with Nigel over the years, I've learned so much. And I have a sneaking suspicion from looking at the chat. I know you haven't seen it, Nigel, but go and have a little look-see. But while you're doing that, okay, so who wants to say something? Matt's bursting. I can see Matt.